Today's episode covers incredibly difficult and upsetting subject matter. We'll be discussing themes of extreme child neglect, mental health struggles, and heartbreaking decisions that lead to the passing of a victim far too young. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Cleveland Police Dispatcher Civil Combo. Do you need police, fire, or EMS?
Oh my God!
Cleveland Police, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
I need big money! It's big money!
What's the address? What is the address?
On the morning of Friday, June 16th, 2023, Cleveland Emergency Services received a frantic call from a desperate mother telling them that she had found her 16-month-old daughter unresponsive in their home. Cleveland Division of Police immediately sprung into action, and what they found was unsettling and, according to them, had been branded into their minds forever. From this point to the investigation and even the court proceedings, what is uncovered becomes increasingly more surprising, horrifying, and heartbreaking as lies repeatedly become exposed. This is the case of Jailyn Candelario. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. When police arrived at the home on West 97th Street, they found 16-month-old Jailyn Candelario lying unresponsive in her pack-and-play. And unfortunately, they were too late to revive her. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators were immediately struck by the condition of the home and of Jailyn. Whatever happened here didn't seem to be accidental in the slightest. And I'm going to give another warning here since I'm about to describe Jailyn's condition, and it is unsettling to say the very least. Jailyn was found to be extremely dehydrated, and her pack-and-play consisted of soiled blankets as well as a bottom liner that was saturated with urine and feces. However, Jailyn appeared to be in a clean outfit despite these surroundings. And Cleveland Division of Police noted that Jailyn's appearance was emaciated with sunken eyes, dry lips, and fecal matter in her mouth and under her fingernails.
I don't know. This part just makes me so mad. This is one of those moments that just stay with you because without knowing anything else, the condition of Jailyn said so much. No one should ever have to see a child like that. And then the questions start right away. Where'd the mother been? Why was Jailyn in what looked like a fresh pair of clothes? And most importantly, what the hell happened here?
Right. The state of everything is so heartbreaking. And the police, they knew pretty quickly that they were dealing with some kind of neglect case. So they immediately brought in Jailyn's mother, the 911 caller, 32-year-old Crystal Candelario, for questioning. Reportedly, Crystal wasn't in a state of panic. In fact, investigators described her demeanor as almost detached, too calm for what a mother who had just found her child unresponsive in her home.
Yeah, and I guess it's not really uncommon for people in shock to seem distant, but if you watch the interrogation online, this felt very different. She was collected and cooperative, very matter of fact, which is a very stark difference from the frantic voice that we heard on the 911 call.
Yeah, and during the interview, she sits there almost lifeless, which makes everything a little bit more uncomfortable to watch.
She did a vomiting the last week, Monday and Tuesday, two times. But I was trying controlling because I know I give to her Tylenol or something, for controlling the vomiting.
Okay.
Refusing to do the food, and she was with no appetite. I said, oh my God.
This is after last Monday and Tuesday when she was throwing up?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you talking about Monday and Tuesday like 4 days ago?
Yeah,
okay.
Last week, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because we almost done this week, so I talk about,
Because what this week?
This week. Yeah, I talk about because we almost done, the
we're almost done with this week.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the 911 call, she was screaming and crying, but now, the police interview, there's nothing. And I don't want to judge the way anyone chooses to grieve, but the police noted that demeanor in her. So Crystal speaks primarily Spanish throughout the interview, and another detective translates for her. And the detective starts off by saying that Crystal said when she woke up that morning, she noticed that Jailyn's hands and feet were stiff and cold. So she immediately called 911, giving Jailyn CPR until paramedics arrived. It was at this point that paramedics had told Crystal that her baby had passed away. So the police, they press Crystal for more details, like where Jailyn usually sleeps, how long she usually sleeps, and any context to how Jailyn might have been feeling leading up to this day. And Crystal mentions that she had noticed that Jailyn was getting really thin over the past week. She had been throwing up and developed a rash that Monday, leading to the idea that Jailyn had been sick for at least a few days leading up to this incident.
And this is the part where I think a lot of people start to have questions. Because if Crystal was noticing that Jailyn had been getting thinner, throwing up, and developed a rash, to me that sounds like a child who really needed medical attention. So why wasn't she taken to the doctor?
Exactly. And the police do ask Crystal that later on, but in the beginning of the interview, they need to get as many facts as they can before they start to question Crystal's statements. So they continue on. They ask her about the details of Jailyn being put to bed the night before. Specifically, they asked if she had put a diaper on Jailyn, trying to account for the state of Jailyn's pack and play. Crystal explained that she had put Jailyn to bed with a diaper on, but that it had fallen off in the middle of the night, which is why she had put a fresh pair of clothes on her in the morning. Crystal then says that she had been planning to take her to the hospital that day and wanted her to be dressed for that.
So this is kind of the first hole in Crystal's original story. She originally said that she found Jailyn stiff on Friday morning and immediately called 911 and began CPR. But now she put a fresh pair of clothes on her before calling 911 or starting any type of life-saving measures. And she says she was planning on taking her to the hospital instead. So at what point did she actually notice that Jailyn was unresponsive, if not immediately? It's a small detail, but it's definitely an inconsistency.
Right. And I think that's what the investigators are trying to get to by asking her about these details. So now they have Crystal's initial story. The police were ready to put some pressure on her about what had really happened over the past few days, asking her if at any point Jailyn was left unattended. At first, Crystal strongly denies that she ever left Jailyn alone in the house.
What Crystal didn't know was that by this point, investigators already had proof that Crystal wasn't being honest about her presence in the home. Investigators had already spoken with Crystal's neighbors, who recounted that Crystal had a history of abandoning her child. One even said that in one instance, they had agreed to take care of Jailyn for the weekend, which had turned into half a month. The neighbors said that they tried to contact Crystal during this time, and they were basically left in the dark until she returned. So we have an established history of Crystal leaving her baby behind, which investigators are already aware of.
Yep. And Crystal doesn't know this yet, obviously. So the police are letting her back herself up into a corner, for lack of a better term. And Crystal explains that whenever she leaves the house, Jailyn goes with her, or Crystal contacts her mother to come by and watch the baby while she's away. She asserts very seriously that Jailyn has never been left alone. The investigators ask her 2 or 3 more times if Crystal was sure that she was telling the truth about this, and Crystal didn't budge. But police not only had the neighbors' statements, they actually had footage from one of the neighbors' doorbell cameras, which showed Crystal arriving at the house on the morning of Friday, June 16th at exactly 7:36 in the morning.
But it doesn't show Crystal leaving?
No. And that's what really started to shift the direction of this interview. The officers, they knew at this point that Crystal wasn't being truthful, and they had the doorbell footage to back that up. But this is where the trail ended for them. So all they had left was to start pressing her with the truth of this camera footage, asking her why her car was seen returning to her house right before she called 911. And here, Crystal pivots her story, saying that she woke up at 7:20 in the morning and immediately left the house to go to the pharmacy and get diaper rash cream for Jailyn. But she was only gone for about 5 minutes, according to her.
If I were the investigators, there's no way that I'm believing this. And in the interview, the officers then asked Crystal which pharmacy she went to, and she said she couldn't remember. So this pivoting to the fact that she went to the pharmacy, one that was open at 7 in the morning, isn't really sitting right with me. We don't even need to get into the fact that if this story were true, she was definitely gone for more than 5 minutes.
And it didn't sit well with officers either, especially when she couldn't even name the pharmacy that she visited to get the rash cream for Jailyn, even though it was only a few hours earlier than this interview. And the fact that it was so early in the morning, before typical pharmacies would open, raised a red flag. So the officers asked Crystal if the camera footage that they have is going to show her leaving earlier that morning to go to the pharmacy, 5 minutes before to be exact. Obviously, they've already seen the footage, so they know that there's no video of her leaving that day, only returning.
So if there's no footage of Crystal leaving, she had to have been gone from the night before or even longer.
Exactly. And that's where officers are trying to get to with this interview. They already had proof that Jailyn was left alone in the house, but how long was Jailyn left unattended? So they start pressing Crystal about the details of the pharmacy story, almost making it seem like they are trying to work together with her to figure out which pharmacy she went to. They say that if she can't remember, there's only a few pharmacies that would be open at 7:30 in the morning. And if she were only gone for 5 minutes, then the one that she would have visited would have been pretty close to her house.
And at that point, all it would really take is a simple Google search of 24-hour pharmacies within 2 miles of Crystal's house, which probably wouldn't yield that many results, and they could easily go and check if the story were true.
Exactly. And Crystal starts to realize that the new story she gave isn't going to stick. So the officers give Crystal one last chance to tell the truth. They explain to Crystal that they are going to get all the doorbell camera footage from the neighbor to see exactly when Crystal left the house. So if any part of her story is untrue, now is the time to say so.
And a lot of you might be thinking, well, if the police already have that footage and can check with nearby pharmacies to see if she visited, it seems like they would have all they need to piece together if Crystal is guilty or not. But we have to keep in mind that even though we have footage and now this pharmacy information, it won't do much to tell the real story of what happened to Jailyn. Evidence is good, but without a confession, you still have the burden of proof. A confession would take most of that burden away.
And not to mention, having her confession gives a ton of closure to those who are traumatized by Jailyn's passing, if Crystal was involved in it. And I mean, it won't take away someone's pain, but it can help. So officers, they press Crystal about the truthfulness of her pharmacy story. But before she can give a response, an investigator presses for more details about the story about the pharmacy visit. I don't know if he could tell that she wasn't going to budge, but he continued on by asking Crystal how she paid for the rash cream. This is where they get into a rabbit hole about Cash App cards, because Crystal originally said that she used a Cash App card, but when the officer asked to see the statement on her phone of her purchasing the rash cream, she then said that she wouldn't see it because it's Cash App and not a bank card. The officer presses her further, and then Crystal switches again, saying that she actually used the card to take cash out of the ATM and use the cash to pay for the rash cream. And this goes back and forth for a few minutes, with Crystal obviously attempting to get her story straight on the fly and experiencing more pressure as investigators poke holes in the details she's providing.
And it's so crazy to me that so much of this interview depends on this tube of diaper rash cream that Crystal allegedly went out to buy. But the inconsistencies, they keep stacking up. She just keeps circling into new details that fit the narrative that shifts any blame away from her. And to be honest, it's chipping away at any possibility that Crystal wasn't involved in this.
Exactly, which is why investigators keep asking for details. Every time Crystal provides new information, they have more reason to doubt her honesty about what occurred. So the end of the rabbit hole consisted of Crystal denying that there is any kind of proof of payment for this diaper rash cream. And investigators even look Crystal up on Cash App during the interview to see if they can see any transactions on her end, only to find that Crystal's alleged Cash App account doesn't even exist.
Okay, so now it's completely obvious that she's just making things up.
Yeah, she's getting pretty creative.
And how frustrating must this be for the investigators? She's just telling lie after lie. I mean, her baby was found dead, like horrible conditions. Like, come on, just get your shit together and get this baby some justice.
And that exact fact opens the door for investigators to push Crystal into explaining what truly happened to Jailyn that morning. And they warn her again that they're going to review as much camera footage as they can, giving her the opportunity to be honest about her actions in light of this situation. And so they start to appeal to Kristen as a parent. They appeal to her by saying that they don't think she's a bad person, but they do think that she made a bad decision. They explain that she has a responsibility to her child to give her medical attention when she's sick, and that she's sitting in an interview with them because she has endangered her own child's life by refusing her medical care while openly admitting that she had been thin, throwing up, and only drinking liquids.
Which Crystal pushes back by initially saying that she wasn't bleeding anywhere, so I figured that Jailyn was fine.
And she's almost trying to frame it like Jailyn had this mysterious sickness that no one knew would kill her, like when someone dies mysteriously from the hiccups. That's a Grey's Anatomy reference.
I remember that.
But the reality is that Jailyn was showing signs that she was sick, starving, and extremely dehydrated. Not to mention the state of her pack and play. No matter what Crystal tried to say, something else was going on here. And it's interesting that it's now twice that they've pressured Crystal to tell the truth, but then don't give her the opportunity to respond to that pressure. But after they appeal to Kristen as a parent and as a person, Crystal breaks down and cries, finally showing the emotion that she's been so absent of this whole time. And I think this was the sign for the officers that Crystal was ready to tell the truth. The investigator that's translating for Crystal says that Crystal is agreeing with what they're saying, and they give her the opportunity to explain what truly happened. This is when Crystal says that the video footage from the neighbor is going to show that she was not home for the entire week, explaining that she was in Detroit working and that Jailyn was home unattended the entire time.
And this is the part of the story that your stomach just kind of drops. Hearing her admit that she was gone that full week, knowing that Jailyn was home alone that entire time, it's just so freaking heartbreaking. And then it starts to sink in what Jailyn must have gone through that entire time.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that's just so hard to even process. Now, if you remember the initial police responders, they said that the scene will be branded in their minds forever because the state of things was just awful when they found her, and it was obvious from the state of her that something very tragic happened, and honestly, possibly avoidable. They just didn't know exactly what that was at the time.
Right, and those officers knew that Jailyn showed serious signs of dehydration and starvation, and that wouldn't have happened from Crystal leaving her unattended for 5 or even 10 minutes while she went to the store. Now it's just a matter of what actually happened.
Exactly. So Crystal explains that Jailyn was left completely unattended since her parents were in Ecuador, and there was no one else to watch her. She went to Michigan on Monday morning while Jailyn was still asleep, checked into a hotel, and began working for Uber and visited some friends.
Okay, and Crystal's saying that she went to Detroit for work. And I'm sure this isn't secret information, but you can drive for Uber almost anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, she went to Detroit, but she lives in Cleveland?
Yeah, what's wrong with Cleveland?
Exactly. And the investigators thought the same thing. They asked her, why Detroit? This is where Crystal explains that she has friends in Detroit and wanted to take advantage of the fact that she can travel and visit friends, but still make money through driving Uber.
Okay, I'm not even going to begin to understand that, but even if that was the case, what would compel you to leave your infant daughter behind during the trip completely alone? So why not just take your daughter, you know, that one responsibility that you have, like the biggest one in your life?
And that's another thing that investigators asked Crystal. Her response was that since Jailyn was sick, she wanted to have a good time and travel without worrying about taking care of her daughter.
That's not how that works.
Then they asked Crystal another question about her travels and catch Crystal in yet another lie. They tell Crystal that they can see where people have traveled and when, and ask her if she's been to Puerto Rico recently. Crystal responds by saying that she did go to Puerto Rico in the beginning of June for 3 days with the same friends from Detroit, and Jailyn had been left home again. So the 8th to the 11th.
And when she says this, you can see the detectives' heads just drop.
Yeah, even they're struggling to handle their emotions while they're talking to her.
In this interview, it was taken the day that Jailyn died, which was June 16th. And Crystal says that she flew from Detroit to Puerto Rico on the 8th and flew from Puerto Rico to Detroit on the 11th, which means she didn't leave Jailyn for 5 days. She left her for 8.
8 days.
8 freaking days.
The reality of the situation just became a whole lot worse because they continued to talk to Crystal, and the detectives that are translating for her, they're really starting to lose it at this point, which I don't blame her for. Crystal alleges that she did return home on the 11th to check on Jailyn, and then she left again the morning of the 12th, which was that previous Monday, to go back to Detroit. But I honestly don't know if I believe that.
I don't think you can believe anything she says at this point.
And this is where the investigators, they start to lose it a little bit more. The one who was translating for Crystal starts to become visibly upset at these words, saying that her heart is hurting for Jailyn. This investigator basically echoes what we're all thinking, that Jailyn did not have to pass away, that she was an innocent bystander who did not have to lose her life. This was preventable. Jailyn needed her mother's nurturing, her care, and she was left home alone with a few bottles of milk, sick, in need of a mother.
And honestly, I don't blame the investigators for letting their emotions take over for a minute. I mean, how could you not? This is an innocent 1-year-old child that was powerless to keep themselves alive while their mother is just out having a freaking ball. It's just absolutely heartbreaking.
It is, especially even seeing her pictures on Facebook. You know, she's smiling with her friends. She's on a beach, like having such a great time, while her daughter is literally starving to death.
Yeah.
Dehydrated.
Totally messed up.
And the investigator didn't feel bad for it either. She said that she was doing her job, doing the right thing by bringing Crystal into that interview, that getting justice for Jailyn was their sole purpose in that moment, and they had accomplished that. Crystal nods in agreement the entire time that the detective is talking. And as the emotions start to calm, they ask Crystal if she has any questions for them. And she responds that she wants to tell the truth for her daughter, giving them access to her phone, car, house, anything they needed to close this case successfully.
But that part is kind of unsettling too. She says that she wants to tell the truth for her daughter, but the only time that she actually told the truth was when she had no other choice. She was backed into a corner because of the evidence that was against her.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking too. She's only wanting to come clean because she got caught, not for her daughter. If any of this was for her daughter, she would still be alive today. So it's here that the interrogation concludes, and police are left to build their case against Crystal. And if we already thought we had the truth, the remaining evidence will prove that we still don't. So let's start with the neighbor's doorbell camera footage. As investigators promised during Crystal's interview, they reviewed days of camera footage related to the final timeline that Crystal gave them. And what they found was soul-crushing. They found multiple pieces of video camera feed where you can hear Jailyn screaming and crying from inside the house well into the night with no one there to hear her or comfort her.
And the last one is 2 days before Crystal returned home and found her. Knowing that she was in there screaming and crying alone for days, it's hard to even process that. And imagine the neighbors reviewing their own camera footage and realizing what they were hearing and that no one knew. That has to stay with you. It's going to haunt you for the rest of your life.
Exactly. And it becomes even worse when we realize that this footage, yet again, contradicts the final story that Crystal gave during her interview, which she says she went to Puerto Rico with her friends June 8th and returned to Cleveland on June 11th, and then left again until the 16th. Well, it's clear from this camera footage, combined with Crystal's own social media post, that Crystal left Jailyn on June 6th, not June 8th.
So we've gone from 5 days to 8 days to now 10 days that Jailyn was left ill, alone, and suffering. It's devastating. And remember that this woman said at the end of her interview that she wanted to tell the whole truth for her daughter. But the neighbor's camera footage also proved that Crystal never returned home on the 11th like she said. She was gone for a full 10 days. And never thought to send someone over to check on her daughter who was locked in a pack-and-play for over a week.
And to find out yet again that she wasn't telling the full truth? I don't even have the words for that. And to think that she was posting on social media during that time like nothing was wrong, it's just so horrifying. I mean, it's so hard to even imagine what Crystal might have been thinking during this time. And even the investigators asked her during her interview, at what point did you think it was okay to leave your daughter alone like that? We're all just trying to understand what is going on in this woman's mind to make her do this to her own child. And recently, Crystal did speak with news outlets about her mindset while she did this, and we'll get into that in a minute. The social media post that we mentioned is one of the most sensational parts of this case, and I know we mentioned it twice now, but we have a Facebook post from Crystal during her vacation in Puerto Rico without anyone knowing at the time that her own daughter was at home, sick, starving. This post features Crystal in a bikini on the beach with a caption reading, "The time enjoyed is the time truly lived." Since then, there are thousands of comments in support of the suffering that Jailyn endured while she was making this post. Some read, "I don't understand how anyone could do this to someone, especially a child, especially a poor little baby. The mother is a monster. And prison her without food, light water, and clothes, even though this is too small of a punishment. How can a mother do such a horrible act to her own baby?"
I can't blame people for commenting on this. As we said before, it's hard to try and fathom why someone would do this, especially when Crystal never offered up the full truth on her own.
Right. And that's another big part of this. Crystal never gave the full story of what actually happened, even though she told detectives that she wanted to tell the truth to get true justice for Jailyn. But that was obviously a lie as well. We'll have to wait for the court proceedings to come out to get the full, true story of Crystal's choices that led to Jailyn's passing. So let's talk about that. So in 2024, Crystal Candelario, she pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of child endangerment. So there was no trial involved. But her sentencing hearing was extremely overwhelming with impact statements, statements from Crystal herself, and experts who were involved in the case adding context that honestly makes everything so much worse. A forensic pathologist, Elizabeth Mooney, explained to that courtroom that children experience the most extreme separation anxiety between 9 and 18 months. And if we remember, Jailyn was 16 months old at the time of her death.
So not only was she physically suffering, sick, starving, and dehydrated, she was also experiencing serious emotional suffering.
Yeah. And this is the part that makes the reality of this situation just that much more devastating, if that's even possible. Mooney was fighting back tears as she explained the pain and suffering that Jailyn endured from her physical ailments, as well as the extreme feelings of abandonment. It's a kind of suffering that none of us can fathom. Law enforcement officials, one of which was Sergeant Teresa Gomez, who translated for Crystal during her interview, also fought back tears as she described the baby's conditions when they found her on the morning of June 16th. This is when she said that it was a case that would be branded in her mind and heart forever. The assistant county prosecutor, Anna Farolya, said that animals take care of their infants better than Crystal did.
And when you have seasoned officers and prosecutors, I mean, these are people who've seen the worst of the worst break down. that tells you everything you need to know about how bad this actually was.
Yeah, and it really shows how deeply this case affected everyone who had been involved in it. For them, it's a memory that they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. And after these statements, Crystal's family and Crystal herself were given a chance to respond. Crystal's parents, they pleaded with the judge for mercy, citing that Crystal had serious mental health struggles that led her to make these choices. Crystal's mother, Ketty, said that her daughter had been battling with health struggles, including mental health illnesses and fainting spells. She went on to say that her daughter had stopped taking medications for depression without properly tapering down the dosage, which worsened her depression and anxiety, making her unable to think clearly or make sound decisions about Jailyn's care.
You know, I'll echo again, there's no justification for her action when she was out there, what she was doing. She could have called somebody, she could have done that, yes, but when you're in that state, when you're off medication, mismanaging your thoughts, you're not thinking clearly. Her body she had to get out, and she was having fun. If she was okay, in her mind, Jailyn was okay. But of course, that's not the case. But I will point to when she did finally get home, and we heard that 911 call, she didn't want this to happen. You could hear that. Screaming, help me, my daughter's dying. Yes, because of your actions. Because of what your choices were. And you took responsibility for that. But that call, that one tiny breach from whatever was going on in her head, that reality that her daughter was dying, she was calling for help. She didn't want that.
And Crystal told the court that she prays every day for forgiveness, noting that she believes God and Jailyn have forgiven her for what she's done. She said, "I'm not trying to justify my actions, but nobody knew how much I was suffering and what I was going through."
I don't know. That part's hard to hear because even with mental health struggles, it's difficult to understand how anyone could reach the point of leaving their child alone for that long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like Crystal had a psychotic break. I mean, remember, her neighbors reported that she had a history of this type of behavior, just disappearing. This wasn't just a one-time mistake.
And honestly, in the photos on her Facebook, she looks like she's having a pretty good time.
Yeah, a friggin' blast.
And that's what the judge echoed when handed down Crystal's sentence. She reflected on the tiny prison that Jailyn was trapped in for days while Crystal was out having a good time. She said that the bond between a mother and a child is one of the most purest and sacred bonds. It's a relationship built on love, trust, and unwavering protection. And Crystal committed the ultimate act of betrayal. The judge went on to say that Jailyn had waited for someone to save her, and that Crystal could have done that with a simple phone call. Instead, she saw photos of Crystal on a beach while her child was eating her own feces in an attempt to survive.
Ugh.
After this, the judge says that just as Crystal didn't let Jailyn out of her confinement until she died, Crystal, too, should spend the rest of her life in a cell without freedom, adding that the only difference is that the prison will at least feed her.
We've heard a lot of cases, and that's honestly one of the harshest things I've ever heard a judge say. But I'm with it.
Heck yeah. And this sentence is exactly what comments on Crystal's Facebook post were asking for. The public's consensus was that Crystal deserved life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I think that's important to acknowledge that postpartum depression and other maternal mental health issues are very real, and they can have devastating effects on both the mother and the child if they're not treated properly. I mean, we've seen cases where lack of support, untreated depression, or postpartum psychosis have led to tragedies. But in this case, even with those struggles, there were so many opportunities for Crystal to ask for help, whether it was from family, neighbors, or medical professionals.
Despite all of her suffering, that little baby persevered, waiting for someone to save her. And you could have done that with a simple phone call. Instead, I see photos of you on a beach while your child was eating her own feces in an attempt to survive. Photos mean something. and I'm well aware of mental health, but didn't look like you were too concerned about your child. As if that wasn't bad enough, you extended your stay in Detroit without regard to Jailyn, alone, in pain, clawing her face in distress from the exhibits I just looked at, trapped in a tiny prison that you left her in.
Mental health can explain certain behaviors, but it doesn't erase the choices she made or the suffering that Jailyn endured.
Right, because at the end of the day, there were so many lifelines that she could have reached for. And that's what makes this so hard to understand. There were outs, and she didn't take them.
She's even asked her neighbors multiple times to watch her child, and they did.
Yeah, sorry guys, I can't come.
Yeah.
No babysitter.
And that theme of it being hard to understand is what lingered following the sentencing. People still wanted to hear from Crystal to try and understand why she made the choices that led to Jailyn's extreme suffering. And they did. Following her sentence, Crystal decided to speak with a Spanish news outlet about the case, addressing the fact that her actions are difficult for the world to understand, especially the people who question and point out that she committed a diabolical act. She said, "I gave my testimony. I took blame for my actions. I was experiencing emotional stress. My daughters have always been everything, my whole world to me. Jailyn is always in my heart and is with me wherever I go."
Okay, and you heard that right. She said daughters with an S. So Crystal has 2 daughters. One of the daughters is 7 years old, and she wasn't home at the time of Jailyn's death. She was in Ecuador with Crystal's parents.
Yes. So we don't have much information about the other child, which should be the case since she's an innocent bystander in this situation and is probably insanely traumatized by this whole case. So keeping her anonymous and away from the coverage is the best choice, in our opinion. As far as the supposed full and real story that Crystal told the news, she had been in the hospital in January and February of 2023 with emotional and mental problems where she attempted to take her own life. According to her, after she returned from the hospital in March was when she decided that she wanted to take a vacation. But that's directly contradicted when she says that she did not purchase tickets in advance for this trip. She actually said that she left for the trip on impulse, that she grabbed her things and ran out of the house like someone was chasing her. She explained that her only motivation in going to Puerto Rico was to get away from a life full of stress, depression, and anxiety that she just didn't want to continue living because of the problems she had in her life. As far as Crystal's state of mind during the vacation, she reported that she thought about her daughter the entire time, saying that her friends that were with her on the trip could see that she was distracted and angry. She said that she thought about calling someone to check on Jailyn, but she didn't, and it was a mistake.
Hearing her describe her state of mind is complicated. I don't know. I guess I'm supposed to care about that, and she's struggling. But you can see a disconnect between her thoughts and her actions, not even addressing the inconsistencies in the story that well. She says she planned the vacation in March, but she says she was thinking about Jailyn the whole time. But there was no follow-up to make sure that Jailyn was even okay. And it's like she's acknowledging the danger in her head, but she's kind of like convinced herself to not deal with it. Which to me, that's kind of where it turns from mental health to just flat-out neglect.
And that's how everyone involved felt. But at least we had some semblance of closure by this sentence. But it doesn't end there. Even though Crystal had said multiple times throughout the court proceedings and in her interview with the news that she can accept the consequences of her mistakes, her actions just don't reflect that. So on January 16th of 2025, Crystal Candelario, in legal representation, appealed her sentence for Jailyn's death, claiming ineffective assistance of counsel. She argued that one of her attorneys had a conflict of interest, and because of that, her guilty plea wasn't entered knowingly or voluntarily. She also claimed that her lawyers provided no benefit through the plea. But the weird part is, that she wasn't contesting that she was guilty, only the legal adequacy of her representation during the plea process, hoping for a lighter sentence.
So obviously she's not willing to accept the consequences of her action, which most people think is fair for what she did to Jailyn. Oh, it's just upsetting.
And it was swiftly concluded that Crystal's appeal was utterly baseless, citing that she had no evidence or proof to support these claims. And the court upheld that the facts of Candelario's conduct demonstrate a level of depravity few cases reach. The victim's death was gruesome, slow, and one can only imagine agonizing. They affirmed that Crystal does not dwell on underlying facts and creates narratives as she sees fit to meet her own motivations.
I mean, the idea to even appeal this is just ridiculous, and it just proves that Crystal still isn't accepting the reality of what she did.
Right, and as we already talked about, everyone involved had accepted the reality for the past 2 years. Everyone except Crystal, apparently. And that's where this case leaves us, with so many what-ifs and a deep sadness for a life cut so painfully short. Jailyn's story is one that will stay with the people who worked on it, the neighbors who heard her cries, and anyone who heard what she endured. It's a reminder that behind all the reports and timelines, there's a little girl who deserved love, safety, and care, and the people around her will always carry the weight of knowing she didn't get that. At the sentencing, the lead detective in the case, T.J. Powell, who was the other investigator questioning Crystal on June 16th, said that Jailyn will never be forgotten, and he read her a poem in her memory.
We're Jailyn's voice. Fortunately, there's no family on our side, but we're her family. I wrote a short poem, just something in commemoration of Jailyn's life. J is for the justice that'll be received today. A is for the angel wings she earned on that joyful day. I is for the incremental repetition, build-up of suspense, for an innocent bystander's death that clearly makes no sense. L is for the lack of love while alone for 11 days. Y is for a young life that was taken away. N is for new eternal life Jailyn gained on that day. No child should ever have to die this way. Jailyn's life truly mattered. Unfortunately, she died trying to survive off of her own urine and fecal matter.
Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode.